Hi, I'm going to read you the first chapter from my novel Foolish Heroines, which is going to be published next year in 2021. So, this is a sneak preview, and I really hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1, Foolish Heroines. When Yanina Reston touched Owen Reston's arm and her hand passed straight through it, it only confirmed what she'd suspected for some time. Owen, her partner, was simply a figment of her imagination. He wasn't really there at all. She wondered if he'd ever been real, and if so, whether he'd disappeared all in one go, or whether it had happened gradually, bit by bit. She had an acquaintance whose husband had vanished in the supermarket. One minute he was there, walking down the aisle between the cream crackers and the 4-packs of lager, and the next he was gone. He'd undressed, leaving his clothes and shoes in a neat pile. Then he'd dived into the salty depths of the deep freezer amongst the battered cod and the new crab meat fish cakes, never to be seen again, tossed about for infinity on the tides of consumer capitalism, missing, presumed dead. Owen had been looking increasingly transparent since the jumper incident. The question was, who'd put the jumper onto the boil wash? Who'd committed the sin? Wash with care in cool water, the label had read. Delicate, a sure candidate for Programme J, suitable for hand wash items with a crease guard and a gentle spin. The jumper had hung from her hand like an unexpected bloom, an out-of-season blossom defying horticulturalist theory. It breathed out an aura of novelty, a self-conscious exclamation mark at its own existence. Perfectly circular drops of water clung to the surface, resisting its pull, but inevitably to be absorbed by it. "What the fuck's that?" Owen asked, as he and Yanina stood in the kitchen. "Is it my jumper?" Yanina leaned against the sink and weighed up the possibilities of reply. The jumper still hung from her hand like a question for which a solution must be found. When objects, or people for that matter, went through such drastic change, could they really still claim to be what they'd originally been? How many individuals who married each other were still the same personalities they'd been on their wedding day? Did that annul the marriage? Both Yanina and Owen stared at the offending piece of laundry still steaming from the hot wash. Neither could quite draw their eyes away from it. "Do you want it to be?" she asked. It was a philosophical question, but he took it as an insensitive reply. "What do you think?" he said. "I think you put it in with the fast colours," she said, "or it could have got put on with the boil wash." They couldn't go on standing forever in an impasse in such a small kitchen, so Yanina walked out into the garden. A few birds sang from the newly blossoming trees, pin-prick specks of delicate colour, gently piercing the cool air. The trees' roots, like wooden toes, entwined affectionately, or engaged in a hidden power struggle beneath the grass. Concealed beneath Janina and Owen's conversation had been an unsaid implication that somewhere along the line she'd been to blame for the jumper, as if at some point she'd been duped into signing a contract with unreadably small print that made her responsible for any shrinkages or mishaps that took place within the womb-like confines of the washing machine. Any mistake would be viewed as collusion between woman and technological hardware. She draped the jumper over her shoulder while she pegged out the other washing on the rotary clothesline. Her two daughters, Litka and Eve, were playing a squareless game of hopscotch on the overgrown triangle of lawn at the side of the shed. In each small city garden, clean washing flapped a circular journey to nowhere. Each garment hung expertly positioned to exploit the breeze to the optimum, pegged to perfection. The jumper struck a strange, incongruous note of error, swinging and clinging in its carefree way. How had she come to be standing at that spot on such a sunny Sunday afternoon? Once she'd been a schoolgirl rebel, choosing positions carefully, attempting to sense out rules like a complicated knitting pattern. She tried to learn the abbreviations for what diplomacy said was right, pleasure through tact, not tactile delight. There were a few men for whom she'd almost learnt the womanly crafts. She would have taken rich ripe fruits and stirred them to a syrup in her heavy saucepan until with her own magic she altered the state of the fruits into a globular, sticky, sweet jam, a domestic quick-step of fulfilled desire. She would have learnt the ancient skill of darning, divesting the passage of time with a perpetual state of newness, smoothing the wrinkles out of hours with calm, competent hands. If they'd tired of her, she would have taken the attributes of other women and would have painfully appliqued them in neat, suppliant stitches to her own skin. She could have become the sort of woman who actually puts whites in the whitewash instead of everything on Programme D, who makes custard from eggs and milk instead of out of ready-made cartons and drinks strictly herbal tea. She'd balked at all this, but somewhere along the way she felt she'd compromised, abdicated responsibility for her own future. In a sense, she'd given away her soul. Here she was now, in her 30s, with no soul. Were souls circular too, like the drops of water on the jumper? A friend once told her about the increasing size of her cervical cap. She'd started with a small one at the age of 18, and then, with progressive pregnancies resulting in a continually expanding cervical circumference, she'd ended up with one the size of a bowler hat. Did souls shrink in direct proportion to the expansion of cervical circumference, the circle of the cervix rubbing against the circle of the soul, the healthy red corpuscles pulsing round the rim and hollowness through the centre? Oh, how aerodynamic these women would be if only they realised what low air resistance they'd have, to what heights they'd be able to soar like self-powered frisbees, cutting sharply, economically, through the soft, bloodless substance of other people's dreams. A sudden gust of wind swept through the garden, grabbing at the newly formed blossoms, whipping at Janina's skirt. It pulled her almost off her feet. The jumper flapped joyously between a pair of grey socks and an off-white sheet.